All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Legacy and Libations, where we talk about life, death, and the beverages that get us through it. I'm drinking a non-alcoholic Heineken. It actually tastes better than the real Heineken. And I'm here with my co-host, John Braddock. John, welcome, founder of My Life and Wishes. How's it going today?
It's going great, and I too, like you, are on a dry challenge. So, Athletic Brewing Company, non-alcoholic beer.
Mm,
Cheers.
is this as good as the real thing?
You know what? It's not bad, and the Heineken Zero is quite good, and the Stella Artois non-alcoholic beer is good. So, who knew you could
Yeah,
get by without it?
I had no idea. Although, if I hope the non-alcoholic Stella is an upgrade from the real Stella, because I can't drink that stuff.
Oh,
Anyway,
in my opinion, it's better.
it's better. Okay,
It's
good.
better. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, guys, welcome to the show. We're very excited about the topic today. This is a first for me. I think it's a first for John, and probably a first for you as well. We're speaking with a mortician and funeral director. In fact, our guest is Amanda Taylor. Welcome, Amanda. She's a Texas mortician and funeral director. We're so excited to have you here. Thanks for making time for us, Amanda.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to
Yeah.
be here.
Awesome. So the flow of today's call, guys, is kind of the standard way. John and I are going to ask some questions of Amanda, and then we're going to open it up to you, and we're going to grease the wheels a little bit here to see what kind of questions you'd even ask a funeral director ahead of time, right? Because as John was joking before we went live, Amanda's day starts when ours ends. So a lot of time we're not there to have these kinds of conversations. So we'll kick it off. And we're here because many of the guests that we've had on this show already in the attorney world are passionate about the work that they do in estate planning to help protect legacies and families. And I think you'll find that Amanda shares that passion. So Amanda, my first question to you is, out of all the careers in the world, why mortician?
Well, I think it starts from when I was a middle schooler. That was when the big camcorders were a thing. And my fellow and colleague funeral director and I, when we were in middle school, we would conduct funerals with our friends. And we thought that was really interesting that we did that. We have all these videos, like VHSs, of us conducting funerals. And she went on to be a mortician in Minnesota, and I went into hospitality. And then I met my husband back in 2015, and he was in mortuary school. And his family owned funeral homes. And I thought, what better way to get into it now? I missed my calling the first time around. So I went to mortuary school, and I joined the family business, and the rest is really history. I've enjoyed it so much. I just wish I would have done it my first career. I'm actually in my second career, but it's definitely near and dear to my heart.
Mortuary school. Tell me more.
So I actually did an online program. It was through Amarillo College. And so it's an associate's degree in which you learn all about the different religions of funerals, because that is very important when you are deceased. Are you Greek Orthodox? Are you, Roman Catholic? There's lots of different Buddhist, Hindu, all sorts of, you got to know all sorts of different religions. And so, just the ethics part, the funeral directing, there's so many facets to what we do. I am not an embalmer. My husband is an embalmer. And that was something I might be going back to school to do, but I do everything but embalm. I even help in the embalming room when it comes to cosmetizing, casketing, dressing, you name it. I've pretty much done it.
I had no idea. I don't even think about the educational component that goes into a career like this as well. So tell me, what's the still digging into the why this career, what's the most rewarding aspect of this work for you?
Well, that's a complex question. So, this is the kind of job that's not for everyone. I've rarely met a person that could have this kind of empathy when people are in their darkest point, whether it be a natural or unnatural death, whether the couple be married for 1 year or 70 years. The loss of a loved one, whether it be a adult or a child, can be the most awful time of your life, or it can be the most celebratory, happy time of your life because you have let that person go off into a better place, and there is no pain and suffering. And I'm not a super religious person, but I do believe that when we all die, we do go to a better place and we will see each other again. And so the most rewarding part to me is having someone come in that is just extremely vulnerable and helping them guide them through the process of death. And in the end, getting that hug or getting that reward of, you made this so much easier, Amanda. This is not something that I was prepared for, but you made it so much easier. And that to me speaks volumes of, the kind of people that do the kind of work I do. You hold people's hands and you guide them through that process. And, you may have to do it over and over and over again. I met with the same family 7 times in 2 years. It was terrible, but they were so happy that they could come back to me and I could offer them the kind of comfort and support that they needed.
I can only imagine the empathy that would take, and the protection of your own spirit too, because I mean, that's got to be taxing on your own emotions.
For most people, I think it is. Funeral directors have a lot of alcoholism and drug addictions in their career lifetimes. A lot of, funeral directors end up going to rehab because they can't take the burden. They're not able to let it go. I am kind of rare in that way, that I'm able to, once I help someone through the process, I just kind of am able to just let it be. And if I see them in the grocery store or they come in 6 months later and they have questions, it's not something that that holds heavy on my heart. It's just, I'm able to help them and then let it go. And not a lot of people can do that. It takes a certain kind of person, like I said, and I'm not really sure how you build yourself for these skill sets. It's just something you either have it or you don't. And it can be very draining. I have seen a lot of people get burnt out in this position because you are surrounded by death, whether it be suicides, premature deaths, children drowning. I mean, you name it, I have seen it and experienced it. And the one thing that people don't realize about funeral directors, that I'm in Texas, and I'm in the Texas Hill Country, where we've got less than 40,000 people in our county. And so what happens is when there is a death, natural, unnatural, hospital, house, we are the ones going on call to do that removal of the body, to take the body into our care. And so, you could be in a million pieces on the side of the highway, or you could be, deceased in your home for several weeks without air conditioning. You have to be prepared for everything. And unfortunately, the police department doesn't give you a whole lot of heads up. So you really have to be prepared for the worst scenario possible. And you have to be able to train yourself mentally and physically for what you could possibly be walking into.
Well, it's interesting. And just so many questions like go through my mind. You talk about that care, and we've been through the experience with family, but death is someone no one wants to talk about, right? It's but as I always say, no one gets out of here alive, and I'm super happy now that you're here to back me up on that, Amanda, because we don't get out of here alive. But you know, there's, by my calculation, there's probably about 100 questions the family has to answer within probably the first 24 to 48 hours following a death. The very first one, my father-in-law was still on his bedroom floor. My wife and I are directly below him in the living room, and the medical examiner's there. The first question she asks, where shall we take Dad? Boom. Yeah, I don't know. There's 10 funeral homes in the city. Who do you recommend, right? And these are the kind of hard, heart-wrenching decisions that family have to make when people don't plan ahead in that process.
That next question is cremation or burial. Do we have permission to embalm? Well, why would you want to embalm my loved one? Do I have to answer that right now? You know, there's things that I think everyone should at least do their research, their due diligence to know there are good funeral homes and there are bad funeral homes. If you Google funeral home lawsuits, you'll find that in the state of Texas, especially, there's one 40 miles down the road. They cremated the wrong body that was supposed to be buried. They were sued for $3 million. There are all sorts of different things that can occur. There's gangs in San Antonio that were stealing bodies out of caskets. You know, you have to be able to, you know, that can be really scary, but you also have to know where you're going. And if you're traveling, if you die on a cruise ship, you know, if you're out in, you know, Key West, where are you going? Well, if you chose cremation, you know, you can find a local funeral home there that will cost a lot less if you don't want to do a viewing. But if you do, you're going to have to get a Southwest cargo flight and fly all the way back home. And that can cost thousands of dollars. So you really need to have an idea and a budget. And there is no right or wrong choice when it comes to choosing death care, but you really should know what kind of reviews your funeral homes locally do have. And the other question that a lot of people have is, what is embalming? Does everybody here know what embalming is or why we would do that process?
Share with us, please.
I bet we don't.
So the number one reason for embalming is to disinfect the body as well as to preserve the body. And so what we're doing is we're making an incision in the neck or in the femoral or the, I'm not an embalmer, but I would use the femoral artery. And so what you would do is you would use that artery, you would push the embalming fluid through and you would drain the blood out. And so that embalming fluid would be used to revive the color in your body and make it to where your body is not going to dehydrate, as well as the disinfecting process of, you can get really sick from being around a body that's not embalmed. And not to mention there is a smell, because what happens when someone dies, the degeneration of your body. I mean, your cells are dying, you're dead. And so everything kind of stops. And so it's important that if you are having an open casket or your loved ones will be seeing you, you could be deceased up to 5 days and still have embalming done. But the best possible results are going to be in the first 24 hours of death.
All right, see, and that's stuff I never would have thought of. And that just sparked another question for me, Amanda, because I was also surprised in my trust paperwork is that we didn't even talk about this kind of stuff. So what is it's a two-part question, I guess, is when someone does die and you are doing the funeral direction part and you're walking them through, what is that process exactly? And how does somebody plan for that in advance?
So I was reading some of the comments and you're right, Greek Orthodox does not embalm. And so there are different religions that do not embalm, and you don't have to if you're going to have an open casket. but you would want to do that viewing or visitation as soon as possible. And the body would need to be refrigerated or stored in a cool spot before you would be viewing the body. And so pre-planning. So I am a licensed pre-need counselor. And what that means is I sell life insurance, but only through the funeral home for prepaid funeral merchandise. So for instance, our cremation here in Texas at the funeral home I work at is $25.95. That's $2,595 plus the cost of an urn, plus the cost of permits. So you're looking at cremation is going to be around $2,800 right now in the year 2023. And so if you came in and you picked out your merchandise and you wanted cremation, you would be frozen. If you prepay, you would be frozen in today's prices. And so people that have been doing this since the 70s, I will see pre-needs that were written in the 70s where cremation was $300, and we have to honor that price. So if you do it now, can you imagine the money that you would be saving even in the next 5, 10, 15 years? It's phenomenal. I have burial policies where the average burial in the United States is going to cost between $8,000 and $10,000, and that's with a decent casket. And you can get away with less expensive. You can do more expensive. It's all about customizing. Funeral directors are not salespeople. If you ever meet with a funeral director and they're trying to upsell you to a $10,000 casket, run the other direction. We are not there. We're not salespeople. We're not trained to do that. That's against our code of ethics. And so just for an example, I had a 99-year-old lady that I buried a month ago, and she had a policy from 1973 for $1,200, full-blown oak casket, you name it, the works. I would have done it for $12,000.
Wow.
But it's just it's life insurance, it accrues interest. You're able to lock in the price just like you would in a regular life insurance policy. But this is just pre-planning. You don't have to prepay. It's interest free. You can pay up to 10 years depending on your age. And there's lots of different, I use National Guardian Life. There's Funeral Directors Life. There's all sorts of different policies that you can use. I would shy away that funeral directors don't sell this or funeral homes don't, but you may have like some kind of rider with your own insurance where you can have a death policy, which means you pay like $40 a month. Well, I've seen people pay $40 a month for 20 years. Do the math on that, and it's still only a $10,000 policy. You're better off just going with the funeral home because you just spent a ton of money on $10,000. You've kind of tripled that. So there's lots of different ways to help pre-plan when it comes to the legacy vault and having a trust and making sure that your will has your controlled disposition. Let's say that you have a blended family. You want to make sure that all the kids are on board, because when mom dies and dad has already been deceased for 10 years and 2 of the kids want cremation and the other 2 want burial, there isn't a funeral home in the state of Texas that is going to say, okay, we'll do both. You can't do both. You got to all decide on the same thing. And so that is so important to have those talks. I can't tell you how often I've even met with a 16-year-old and her guardian because her parents died in a car accident. Well, my parents never talked about this. Or the 25-year-old that just had 2 kids. Well, we don't have that kind of money. It's so important that when you have kids, your responsibility is to make sure that when you die, your burden of dying is not left to your children.
It's so funny because, the title of my book, Click Here When I Die, and the subtitle is Making Things Easier for Those You Love. And for those of us on here tonight who have children, I think we'll all agree that our children will never agree. I mean, we can't agree on what to watch on TV. We can't agree on what movie to see. We can't agree on what we're going to have for dinner. And so if we want to think, and my wife and I have 6, and if I want to think that if I die, all my 6 kids will be in at the funeral home talking with the funeral director, and they're all going to agree, yep, dad wants to be cremated. if I haven't told them, there's no way they're going to agree.
Right.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because it's just so important, even though we want to put our head in the sand and pretend like we are going to be the first person in 300,000 years that will not die. Sadly, you will. And hopefully not for a long time. But take these divisive situations that are going to impact family and can be expensive, and eliminate them on the front end. And I love the pre-need or the pre-planning, because it sounds like you save a lot of money. I'm going to live to 105, so I've got another 40 some years to go. So I should pre-plan now, because I'm going to save a lot of money for my family.
You're going to come out on top on that one, John. I mean, besides being yes,
right. Yeah, well, I'll be on the bottom, but yeah.
Well, okay, so that brings me to a question, Amanda. I love what you're talking, where we're going with this is, how do you, as the funeral director, ensure the wishes of the deceased are met? Like, how do you navigate that? If somebody were to die with no direction, who do you listen to?
So there's a couple different scenarios, and I'm looking at some of the chats as well. So, you can, if families are disagreeing, I've seen fist fights in the arrangement. I've seen the police have to come in, it just kind of depends. But you can bury ashes. Yes, you can have the best of both worlds. You can embalm someone, have a visitation, a full-blown funeral service, and then cremate afterwards and bury at a cemetery. There's all sorts of different ways that, we have to come up with, trying to get families to agree or guide them in the right direction. Because there are families that, people sit down, and I had an 85-year-old woman say, my husband came in 10 years ago and he made all these plans for us. He paid for it. I don't have to think about this. I'm so glad. And he came in, bought matching caskets. You don't have to pre-plan or prepay, but you do need to pre-plan in that aspect. And so when people come in and they have no idea, you can't just say, well, what would you like today? Would you like to choose cremation or burial? It's not like going to the grocery store and deciding would you like some apples or oranges today? And so what you have to do is just be able to really engage yourself and be able to read people. I will have, it's especially men. I don't know if it's because a lot of women, are able to be nurturing and take care of their husbands, but it's when men lose their wives, they have absolutely no idea what they're supposed to be doing. Or sometimes in very small scenarios, it is the women. He took care of everything. He didn't, I've never made a decision. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And so it's just being able to guide, well, what do you see that you want to do? I don't want to do anything. Okay, well then maybe direct cremation, and going to your favorite spot at the lake and scattering ashes is something you want to do privately. Or maybe your son was on the football team and he was a senior in high school. And maybe we do that at the auditorium, and we do a closed casket, and we have a local graphic designer, make the football team, put everything on the casket when it comes to numbers and signing. And, you can do, customizing is so important. And so just being able to spend that time with people, get to know them. Everyone has a story. And once you start to hear the story of that person who's passed on, you're able to help make those decisions, not necessarily for them, but with them, and make them feel empowered. Like at the end, they did all this, but really, I myself as a funeral director did most of it. But, I pushed them in that direction, not in you need to buy this $10,000 casket. And yes, you should go to the most expensive cemetery in town. That's not something that any funeral director, and I've heard lots of horror stories. I know some funeral directors that do get commission, and I was never one of those funeral directors, but it's very rewarding to be able to turn such an awful situation or an awful loss into something that can be beautiful at the end. And, you know, people can look back. We do a lot of video tributes. We do a lot of live streaming. COVID has really opened up the technology doors for funeral service, in which we're able to really customize things a lot more than we were able to. And so to give somebody a video tribute with all those pictures that they had for the last 50 years, or a live stream because their son is overseas in Japan, you know, able to share those experiences of, you know, funerals. And a lot of people will say, well, funerals are just a waste of money. Just cremate me and throw me over the fence. And I hear that all the time. My dad is one of those people. But, you know, funerals, we need to have all come to an understanding that they don't have to be at a funeral home. They don't have to be at a church. They could be in your backyard. It is important for the grieving process to be able to have that closure by giving that person that you love so much some kind of service, because funerals aren't for the dead. They never were. They're for the living.
That's really powerful. And what's coming to me is that, again, in the same vein with the pre-planning part, is you talked a lot about just kind of the standards, right? Like there's burial and cremation, but there's other options now available too. And you, when we first did the intro call, Amanda, you blew my mind with some of these things, aquamation, green burials and stuff. Can you touch on some of those options and the importance of planning ahead if that's what you want?
So depending on where you live, there are a lot of different options. Aquamation is not legal in the state of Texas. If you are interested in alkaline hydrolysis, which is aquamation, which is literally almost like a saltwater solution, and you are put in a stainless vat and the water is heated, and it takes about 4 hours, like a wave. The water would go back and forth, and you are left at the end with almost like, it's like ash, but it's more of like a beautiful beach sand, and it's your body, it's your bones. And so it costs about $5,000 to $6,000, which is about twice as much as cremation. In some states, the closest state that we have is Oklahoma, and you are able to do it there. But other than that, you know, your body could be shipped there, but we can't do it here in Texas. They are working on getting permitting. The same thing in Seattle or in Washington. Aquamation is very popular. Cremation is at 71% there, which is one of the highest in the United States for percentages. Another up and coming, I guess, option is in Colorado. A lot of people are interested in open air cremation, which that is the only state that is legal, which if you can kind of think of, you know, on Indian reservations, what people used to do is they used to almost build a big bonfire, and you would set the body on top and you're burned. I mean, it's an open air cremation. And so you can do that in Texas. You have to get, it has to be on your own land, and you have to have state permit. I have a pre-plan to do that with an old ranch couple that very much want that. You have to get the fire department involved, and I've never experienced it, but I have pre-planned for it because, like you said, if you want these certain things, sometimes you have to really plan it out. For example, you can open your own cemetery on your own land wherever you live. You just have to make that cemetery accessible to anyone. You have to establish your own cemetery, and, you know, Jane Doe across the street could come into your land at any time and pay the respects to a body. And if you sold that land, you would have to dig those people up or let the new owner know that exhume, not dig up, the same thing, but, you know, let's have some proper terminology. But there's different things that you can do. The other thing that I'm really interested right now is human composting in Colorado, which you're basically in a almost like a whiskey barrel, I suppose. You really could, it's, you know, it's almost like a whiskey barrel, and your body is put in with alfalfa, wood chips, and a different mixture. And it takes about 30 days for your body to compost into a soil, which is really great for the environment. And you go back into the earth. Now, that's not something that's going to be legal in every state for a very long time. But Colorado has a lot of trees, a lot of mountains. So there is a lot of place to do that. Something that's really big in Austin, Texas, if we have any Texans out there, is green burials. And so what a lot of people will do is they will be cremated. And there are a few parks, they are multi-purpose parks, where it's a dog park, it's like an outside auditorium type, the amphitheater. And so what you get is you get these coordinates, GPS coordinates, and only you know where your loved one is buried with these coordinates. And, you know, you could be out walking your dog out in this dog park or listening to music at the amphitheater, and you could be sitting on somebody 6 feet below. I mean, which is really neat. I mean, you don't want to think of it like that, but you want to think of, can you think of, if we have any Louisiana people out there, I'm actually born from, I was born in Baton Rouge. So cemeteries in Louisiana are fascinating. So when you put bodies in the cemeteries, because it's above ground because of the sea level. So if you ever have a cemetery tour in Louisiana, I strongly suggest that you go do those. And so basically the body is put in, and it is so hot and there's so much cement that the bodies just kind of, well, they cremate themselves to an extent. And you can have cemetery plots with your whole family of like 20 people as they just kind of stack up from time to time over a period of time. And so there's a lot of different options. Green burial is no embalming, direct burial, shrouding the body. There is in Temple, Texas, there's a mortuary service that does a lot of veteran shrouds, which would mean that if you die and you're a veteran and you want a green burial, there's a certain sewing technique for, does everybody know what a shroud is? It's almost like a sheet that you're kind of wrapped in and it's stitched around you. It's really a neat concept, but a lot of people don't understand the concept of mortuary services. Mortuary services work directly for funeral homes. They don't want, funeral home embalmers don't want to do those messy autopsies. They have mortuary services do them.
Oh.
So mortuary services are not contracted for families. They're contracted with funeral homes all around. And so embalming an autopsy body can take up to 6 hours, just depending on the severity of, you know, it's amazing what restorative art can do with someone who has, I've seen people in car accidents have their entire faces ripped off. And I've had the honor and privilege of putting that face back on and making that person look like the person that they were before the motorcycle accident that, you know, took their face off. I mean, it's amazing the things that we get to see that are people in their most vulnerable state. You know, there is no dignity in death, and everybody should know that. We would like to think that everyone dies surrounded by family, and you've got your clean clothes on, and, you know, you brushed your teeth and you just go to sleep. That's not how people die. And, you know, it's one of those things where we've got to be prepared.
Yeah, definitely. And since you're talking about preparation so much, outside of the insurance policy, is there a document that somebody could walk into your funeral home and say, here's what she wanted, or here's what he wanted? Does that exist? Or
yes, so there are planning guides online, and you could customize the songs that you want played, the pallbearers you would like, whether you want cremation or burial, whether you want a specific pastor or you don't want, you know, certain things. Like I have a lot of old ladies that come in and they say, I do not want a male embalmer, I want a female. And, you know, that's the kind of dignity that we can give back to people. when they do die by carrying out their wishes. There is no dignity in death, but after death, the funeral director prepares the body for that last viewing, to say that last goodbye. And so those pre-planning guides that you can find anywhere online, or at your local funeral home, it doesn't cost anything to go in and just have a conversation with a funeral director. A lot of people don't realize that our services are free until you die. Then that's when the charges start incurring. So any funeral home from here to anywhere in the United States, you could go in and say, I want more information about burial. What are my local cemetery options? I don't have any family. What would you do with my ashes? Could you take them to the coast to be scattered? You know, you can carry out those wishes for people. I have a funeral director friend that's going to Galveston next week to scatter about 25 people with the Coast Guard.
Wow.
And those were people that didn't have any loved ones. There's also, you know, situations where, what if I die and I don't have any money and I don't have any family? Well, those cases are called county cases. And in that instance, it's a case in which we call those pauper cases. They're free, but you have to show zero assets. You have to basically be homeless and live under a bridge, but it does happen. But it is so important to have those talks with your loved ones. And if you don't want to have those talks, go to a local funeral home, write it down, and then put it in a vault.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
John, you have this kind of built into My Life and Wishes too, right?
We do. We include, you know, what the final disposition of the body is, name your pallbearers, special notes, food, drink, speakers, where you want it. Is it religious, non-religious? You can answer all these questions. And as you know, Bill, at the very top, I actually build it above all that, a place for eulogy notes, because I want someone to say something nice about me. I should go ahead and write it for them.
Sure.
So, but you know, the thing is that's so shocking. And I have a good friend, his name is Nick. And when he found out what we were building, and this is back in 2016, he looked at me and he said, you know, I wish I'd known Mom wanted to be cremated before I buried her. And it's a sad story, because can you imagine, you go through that, and he was a young man at the time, and then he's finally, you know, months later going through all his mom's belongings, and Mom had, you know, a notebook, a journal or something where she's writing stuff down saying, well, you know, I think if I die, I'd like to be, you know, cremated. Well, you can write it down. It's like having a life insurance policy. If no one knows it exists, it's not going to pay anybody. So you can write your wishes down, but make sure someone knows what they are, where they are, and how to access them.
Yeah, so important. I guess it's a multi-step process here. But I'd love to open it up to questions. I know we have a couple in the chat, and this will tie right into what you were just sharing with us, Amanda, about the going out with a Coast Guard and distributing ashes and spreading ashes. And guys, listening in, if you're ready for questions, please raise your hand. We'd love to bring you up. You can type them into chat, or we can just bring you up conversationally as well. But the question is, do you have to have a permit to spread ashes?
So when you are cremated, you are you sign off, you understand it's a 3-page document. Every funeral home has something that's similar for the crematorium. And so after the cremation has occurred, and different states are different rules and different laws. Like in the state of Texas, you have to wait at least 24 hours to cremate. You have to have the doctor sign the death certificate. You have to get what's called a burial transit permit. And then you have to generate a reported death through the vital statistics system of Texas. Now, there are some states that you can literally just go to the crematorium within the hour of death and just go cremate. And so California and Florida have some different laws. Don't quote me on them, but there are some different rules and regulations when it comes to those kinds of things. But yes, when it comes to cremation, it's you get a cremation certificate, which basically, when you choose cremation, you are put into a cool environment, or a refrigerator, a giant, like a cooler that has areas for each person. You are tagged with a medallion, and this is in every state and every crematory. And so it's almost like the size of a quarter, and it has an identification number on it. And that is going to match all the paperwork, and that's going to be logged into the actual retort, which is the device in which the body is put into, which is called the retort. It's the crematory device that cremates the person. And then after the cremation takes place, it's about 2 to 3 hours. That's 1650 degrees. And you'd be surprised, zippers to like hoodies or to your Levi's jeans do not melt. It is strange. And so you would go through, the only thing that has to be removed before cremation is a pacemaker. So if you do have a pacemaker, you do have to sign that we are able to remove that, because it is an explosive device and it will explode and make a big boom, and it could hurt our $1 million machine. And so once the cremation is complete, you're put into a processor, which just means that it's a blade, almost like a giant blender, that is going to process you into a fine dust. That bag is then tagged, and then you're put into an urn. And so this whole system is logged. And so you have a cremation certificate. And so people are like, well, I'm going to fly to Alaska. So, can I put mom in my suitcase? Well, I would recommend always, because, there's people could think that it's drugs, or people do really weird stuff these days to try to smuggle things. And so what I would do is I would keep my cremation certificate, and I would carry my mother or my loved one or urn as a carry-on. And I would let that TSA agent know, hey, this is my cremation certificate, and I am carrying ashes. And so when you go onto a cruise ship, I have people do this all the time. You don't want to dump an entire urn off your balcony. There are places that you can do it. Like we have the Guadalupe River right here. I don't recommend that you go into the park where people are hiking and just start dumping it everywhere. But there are no rules to just kind of spreading it. Now with the U.S. Coast Guard, you have to be at least 7 miles into the ocean, like from the land. And so, and they can do that. The Navy does that all the time. The Coast Guard does that. And veteran benefits is another thing that people are always wondering. If you are a veteran, people do not realize, and it is not said enough, that veterans have a lot of benefits. You can be buried for free. There are funeral home fees, but we'll take you to a national cemetery. I've buried people at Arlington, Fort Sam, all sorts of different national cemeteries, and it's free. Yeah, and so, and the benefits that come with that, the headstone, the burial benefits, there are lots of different options for the veterans. And you can scatter just about anywhere, but I would definitely be careful about doing it in front of a bunch of people. I see you can transport bodies across state lines. Yes, you can. You would need a burial transit permit, and you get that in all 50 states. I did have a couple that were here from Arizona, and she died. We embalmed her, and he put her back in the RV and took her home. You can do that. We have lots of people from Mexico that come up here, and you can do that anywhere. You can actually carry your loved one. We've had people say, you know what, daddy's at home and he wanted to see mama one last time. So after she died, we took her from the hospital and brought her home. You can do those kinds of things.
Wow. Not like a weekend at Bernie's kind of a thing.
Right.
Do they just sit them up in the, I don't mean to, sorry, my sense of humor, but how do you put them in the back of the RV? You just lay them on the
You have to embalm
there?
to go across state lines. And yes, we shrouded her and we helped put her into the RV. The saddest situation I ever had was a 17-year-old, and she came into our funeral home and she had a backpack. And I was really hoping what was in that backpack wasn't what I thought it was. And she had given birth to a stillborn. And the cops were in the parking lot and they had escorted her, and she wanted to cremate the baby. And so I removed the baby from the backpack. One thing about most funeral homes is if you have a child death, we don't make any profit on that. Everything is done at cost. And if it is a baby cremation, we do it for free. Not all funeral homes are like that, but most are. And we would sell you an urn at cost. And so there are situations I've had like that. I've also seen where, when you die at home, what happens? When you die at home alone, you call 911. You don't, you need to have a justice of the peace or a coroner come out, or a medical examiner. And so in the case of the baby, we do see that a lot, but usually gets out of hospital. In this case, it had happened at home and the cops escorted her. So there's lots of different scenarios.
Wow. Yeah, stuff that we just never even think about here. I think we've got a couple more questions here. Okay, so Teresa brought up a good question. It sounds like there's probably a story here too, but she says, if you have one of these pre-needs policies, how are these honored if the insurance company went out of business?
So that is a great question. I've actually had to deal with that a lot, because back in the day, there was NPS was the company, and it was National Pre-Need Service, and they went out of business, and they scammed a lot of people because they took the money and they ran. Well, Lincoln Heritage and a couple other companies ended up buying the rest of the shares out. And so that company, they'll still honor it. They were just bought out by somebody else. Funeral homes don't like that because the funeral home doesn't make any interest on that. We do accept the policies. It's not something that we really like, but yes, if a company goes out of business or the funeral home goes out of business, something that was really big in the 80s was money laundering, and these companies would, start up, they'd take your money, and then there would be no record of your pre-need. And so there's a lot of court cases involving a lot of funeral homes in the 80s and 90s that did that. But now these insurance policies are used to protect you and protect the funeral home. And so 30 years ago, things were a lot different. Now they cover their butts and you can cover yours by making sure that you're using an insurance company. If a funeral home says, hey, legally they can't say, hey, yeah, pay me cash for this. Oh, your mom hasn't died yet. And then you show up 10 years later and, oh, we don't have any record of you paying for anything. It happens a lot. There was a funeral home about 40 miles from here that they're in a huge lawsuit because the previous owner, he embezzled a lot of money, millions of dollars. And the new owner didn't find out until these people started dying and they couldn't find the policies. And so there's a lot of scamming that was done in the 80s and 90s. But to answer your question, if it was 30 years ago, you would want to definitely go into a funeral director and check to make sure that that policy is good. There's a 99% chance that it is. I've only seen a few that people have cashed out most of the time, where like grandma got this policy, but Aunt Sis needed some money, so she cashed the policy out and there's no money and there's no funeral policy. So you just want to make sure that you make sure that that policy is still good. But no, there shouldn't be any reason why it's not.
Awesome. Great questions, guys. And then Melissa brought up a good point too that we didn't touch on yet, and that's donating the body to science. How does that work?
So donating the body to science, there is a lot of universities. University of Texas locally here is very well known for donating body to science. My grandparents donated their bodies to science. Unfortunately, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I'm definitely an advocate for it, but you have to understand that if you're donating your full body to be a cadaver for science, that you actually have to be in tip-top condition. There is a 30-minute interview process for the funeral director to make sure the body doesn't have jaundice, to make sure that there was no, if there was a car accident, there's a list of things that you have to check off. And unfortunately, if that body isn't in perfect condition, they won't come get it and it will be rejected. And so then people think, oh, well, donating body to science, it doesn't cost me anything. It'll be free. Well, technically it is. You just have to pay the $450 removal fee or whatever the funeral home charges for, initially, if you die at home or you die at a hospital, you do have to go to a funeral home first. And so with that being said, you just want to be really careful and make sure that whichever university or place that you choose to have your body donated to, that you read that fine print.
So what's it look like to reject a body? Does it's like, nope, we don't want it, it's back in your court, or is there a backup plan for that? Oh,
there's no backup plan for that. It is this body. And a lot of times, jaundice is the reason. If there is any discoloring of the skin, like jaundice, where you kind of turn orange or yellowy, they don't want you. And that is a hard thing to tell a family that, well, Donna had her heart set on this for 30 years. Now, what are we supposed to do? We now have to make a decision on what to do with her body. Yes, you do. And, it's for some people, it is because it's free. And, the next cheapest option is cremation. And so with that being said, a lot of people want their body donated to science because after 2 years, they'll send you the cremated remains, which are the ashes, back free of charge. So you do get that person back if you so choose to have them back.
My mind is just blown. I want to jump into my legacy vault and clarify this stuff on what I want.
You do that.
And then I have to have a backup plan for my plan. So
that's right.
Yeah. So
Right.
Amanda, this has been amazing. Thank you for this. And I just want to open it up for last minute questions. Is there anybody on today's call that's got a question? It can pertain to something new. Maybe we didn't touch on a topic that you really were hoping that we would, or you've got a question, a scenario to run by Amanda. This is your time to do it. How often you get to hang out with a funeral director?
Right. Hey, I have a question, Amanda. So is yours the only occupation that doesn't have a bring your kids to work day?
I have 2 kids of my own, 2 and 5. And I'll tell you, my daughter is down the street at kindergarten, and she does from 3:30 to 5. She'll come into the office, and it's so funny because I just have to, she'll go upstairs to my office, but she just kind of will walk by the caskets and she'll go, "You got some more beds delivered." And I just tell her that that's where people go for eternal rest. We'll go out to cemeteries and she'll say, "Mom, people are really buried here." So I think, my daughter hasn't seen a dead body. I've seen thousands of them, but I don't think that I don't think you should hide what you do from your children. I think that there is a way. I have a book that's called How to Talk Death to Kids. And so it's super important to be able to, you could be 7 years old and lose a grandparent. I myself grew up going to visitations and what we would call wakes, where we were viewing bodies constantly. And so, I think a lot of people here probably had that same experience. But it's one of those things where, you could bring your kid to work, but I don't bring her to funeral services. She does like the hearse, though. She's a big fan of that. And she doesn't know what it's for, but she thinks it's cool.
Yeah, it's very regal. I love it. Great question, John. We got 3 questions. 3 people with their hands up. Cayenne, welcome. You want to unmute and ask this question? Hi.
What I'd like to find out, what is the difference between direct cremation and cremation?
That is a good question. We get that a lot. So direct cremation is just kind of slang for cremation. It just means that a lot of people will come in and say, "I just want direct cremation." That means cremation, really no services. Or, you could do direct cremation with a memorial service. Direct cremation just means that we're not going to have the body embalmed. We're not going to do a funeral. We're going to go right to direct cremation, and then we'll have a service following, or we won't have a service, a memorial service, if you will, with the urn or ashes present. And so that's, if that answers your question, it's just direct. It's no funeral. Funeral would be with a burial and a body.
All right, great question, Cayenne. Michelle James, thanks for being here. How can we help?
Hi there. So what sort of services does a notary provide for a funeral home?
Great question. Amanda, do you utilize notaries in your funeral home?
Yes, everyone is a notary but myself at the funeral home. I don't know if I just got skipped on that, or, you know, they just had too many. I don't know how many a business can actually have, but yes, most funeral directors are notaries as well. We notarize our cremation certificate, you know, as proof that that was the person and this was the number that we used to cremate that person, their medallion and their tag. The other reason we would have things notarized is when we're talking about filing life insurance and those prepaid policies, all those documents have to be notarized. The power of disposition, when you go and you do your will and you for sure want cremation and you want to make sure that your wishes are carried out, you have someone notarize that. And so there are lots of facets to having a notary. I know several funeral homes that don't have notaries and they come over to us, or they'll go to a local business. So notaries definitely are more and more needed in the funeral homes if they don't already have their own notaries.
Yeah, I love that. And great question, Michelle, because Laura Buer talks about this in her real world training too. She works specifically with funeral homes doing the beneficiary forms for those insurance policies. That funeral home in Modesto just happens to require notarization for that. So it sounds like there's a lot of documents that are being notarized there. And especially if there's no notaries on hand, there could be a great specialty in funeral homes. So great question, Michelle. Thank you. Jen Neitzel, I see your hand up. How's it going?
Hey, Amanda, my name's Jen Neitzel. It's nice to meet you. I was curious, what can you tell us about the numbers of types of funerals that you're having? What's more popular, the viewing and the burial, or the cremation and possibly burial after that? Because it seems like the older I get, the more funerals I go to, it's cremation and either scattering or burying the ashes. Is that accurate?
So I'm looking at my notes here. So in the United States, cremation is at 60%. And so what we're looking at is a year, there are 2.4 million funerals in the United States yearly. And that is dropping because cremation is creeping higher, burial is more expensive, cemeteries, opening and closing of the graves, the flower arrangement, everything is being inflated year after year after year. And what we're seeing a lot of is, especially in the beautiful hill country, you see a lot of transplants, you see a lot of snowbirds. People aren't from here. So it's very unlikely that they would be buried here. So cremation is the choice because it's a lot easier to pick up the ashes and go wherever you're going to travel to or go back home rather than an actual casketed body, because it is very expensive.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I appreciate that.
That's fascinating to me too, because I don't even think about that. For some reason, my head automatically defaults that everybody would want to be buried, or more people are buried than cremated. But that makes so much logical sense. Yeah, what's that?
I have this book, and I actually don't know the author personally, but it is a great book, and it is called The Right Way of Death: Restoring the American Funeral Business to Its True Calling. And the reason I think this book is so important is because there are companies, these huge companies that are coming and they're preying on these mom and pop funeral homes that really have this true calling to help people. And the company that I'm talking about is SCI. And SCI is the largest funeral conglomerate for funerals and cemeteries. And they're buying up all these mom and pops, and you're just a number to them. They don't care about you. They have an arranger, they have a funeral director, they have an embalmer, they have people that file their paperwork. But at a mom and pop, we really actually, family-owned businesses, we really want to get to know you. We want to get involved in the community. And our job is not over when your loved one is buried. And, it could be 2 years later. I have 85-year-old women that still show up at the funeral home and want to take me to lunch because they're lonely. Or, a man wants to talk about his World War II service because he's 98 years old and he still has a license and should not be driving to the funeral home. But you're able to, I like to say, enrich lives and build relationships as a funeral director. And, it's so important to know the funeral home that you might make a choice to go to, or your loved one may have a choice, or a friend or family member, because nothing against SCI, but I personally, there's so many things that are taken away from when the internet and technology and everything around us, we don't have to talk to people. You can plan all this stuff online and they can come get your body. The funeral home can get your body at the hospital, and we can do this all through email, and you don't ever have to see or talk to me. Or you can come into the funeral home, really start that grieving process, face death, and start the healing process. And so it's so important to really see the big picture of death. And it's important to nobody wants to think about it, but death and taxes are the only two things that are a sure deal in life.
Oh, and definitely the death part. That's so true, Amanda. And I'm just, I don't want to, we're coming up on the hour. We just passed the hour, but is this tied to the positive death or the death positive movement? Have you heard of that? With people just changing the conversation around death, so it's not this taboo topic anymore?
I haven't, but I should get on board. Who are these people? They're my kind of people, I believe.
Right, probably so. I'm curious too. I just got introduced to a few of them as well. Just trying to change the conversation around death, which is what we are doing here today, Amanda. So thank you so much for being a part of that journey too. John, well, Amanda, I just want to give you a chance to say any closing comments, because I know you really wanted to make sure that you delivered value to our audience today, and I can affirm that you have absolutely done that. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to close out with?
If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to provide my email just as information. I am actually one of those people that if I can just share information and be what I call a funeral enthusiast, of sharing knowledge, ethics, morals, values. There are no dumb questions when it comes to this stuff, but sometimes sending an email is a lot less embarrassing, or, a lot less, invasive than actually going into a funeral home. And you're able to prepare yourself so you can go into a funeral home with some confidence, rather than, be kind of timid. A lot of people are scared of the funeral home. I don't understand why, but, it's one of those things where knowledge is power. And so I'd just like to reach out, or have anyone reach out to me if you guys are interested in that information. And if you're not from Texas, I love researching this kind of thing. So I would be happy to find an answer for you. And I just want to thank you all for coming and listening. And I hope I wasn't too all over the place, but I get so excited about this topic and I'm so passionate. And I love sharing what I do with people.
Yeah, that came through loud and clear. I'm so glad that Jen made the introduction to us. I know you guys have a long history together, and I'm just so glad that it worked out so well and you participated in the show and brought so much value. Can you get your email address so we can?
Yeah, I was going to ask for that email address, Amanda, so I can put that in the chat.
Yes, so it is Mortician 9984 at Gmail. And
Got
so
it.
it's the email that I take a lot of funeral questions when people have questions. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are interested, and a friend of a friend has a question. And so, it's one of those things that not everybody wants to talk about death, but you don't have to talk about it if you send me an email.
I love it. I love
That's
it.
great.
And we did just post that email. It's right there in the chat, Lori, twice. Jen and I both posted it in there. Mortician and 9984@gmail.com if you're watching the replay. John, any closing comments from you?
No, just thanks to everyone for being on. This was amazing. Thank you, Amanda. I'm passionate about making sure people are planned and prepared and don't leave a nightmare for the families and make things easier. And your passion really shines through on taking care of all the final details. So one last thought I had, something to ponder, Bill.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this cremation. And so if when I get cremated, if I just have my family put me in an hourglass, that way I could still be at family game night.
And always on time.
That is
Indeed.
not the first time I've heard that one, but
I'm sure.
Amanda's probably heard okay, so that's the next topic, all the death jokes.
yeah, we
Oh,
can
you've done a
definitely have
list.
a whole series full.
I love it.
Mr. Braddock, you're a funny guy. I will definitely pay more attention to you in the future.
Thank you, Marty.
All right, and I know I have my homework laid out. I think I am going to go visit the 2 funeral homes we have in town and just strike up a conversation and see how that goes. I see a blog article in my future. Thank you so much, Amanda, John, Jen, for the introduction. I love how that works out. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place, special guest to be announced. See you then. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye all.